So, my sister always told me that I would not be the kind of person to make a video talking about dating and relationships and whatnot, and she was actually right. But the thing is that it's not so much the dating itself, it has more to do with the interpersonal aspect. I don't view it as it would be any different than me talking to a friend or talking to a stranger, talking to a client, talking to family members. I think any sort of interpersonal conversation that you have with someone will impact how you feel. I was never allowed to date. I've never dated, and I love using that as like a recurring theme or a joke in itself. But for the most part, it doesn't bother me in that sense. What bothers me is sort of, I don't know, the sort of lack of respect or empathy that you can get from these sort of scenarios. And as you can tell by the title, you can probably sense exactly the kind of music that got me through these tough times. So you can just bear with me for this little instance and then we can continue back to our scheduled activities. Oh my god. I guess I can maybe start off with what happened a couple of months ago. I was speaking to someone, and for the most part, it was pretty bland, boring, uninteresting, uninspiring. There was nothing I would say memorable about it. And these, just to put things into perspective, these are not any instances in which you would assume that something is going to come of this scenario because there was never any sort of indication that a relationship or any romantic affiliation would be developing, not because of my apprehension and not solely because of the lack of intent on the other person's behalf. It was sort of a mixture of both, but for the most part, it had to do with the lack of respect. It had to do with the lack of understanding, I guess, of where I was coming from. And there's just something about being with someone that I will never be able to understand simply because it's never happened. But also, I try to think about the things that I'm looking for and that I want, and I can only perceive the situations through what I've experienced. So, familial and platonic relationships, and the things that I wouldn't stand for in those relationships are not going to be things that I would stand for in a romantic relationship. So, that being said, this scenario wasn't going to be developing anywhere for a multitude of reasons. The primary factor being distance, but then with time that passes by, you realize that distance is not the main issue. The main issue is the lack of maturity. We're having a conversation, things seem to be going decently. I get this message the person had been going to, um, the person was going abroad to see their family, as people do during the holidays. And I remember reiterating how I was very, no, at that point, there was no sort of like any very deep, any sort of aspect in that sense. At that point, it was more so about me wanting more communication. So, like, there's only so many times you can request decent communication before it seems like you're getting on your hands and knees begging and pleading for someone to give you any sort of like, acknowledgement that they like you. And when the words aren't matching the actions, that's what makes it a lot more. I had such a bad day. Um, when the words aren't matching the actions, that's just sort of like what makes it very difficult to continue seeing this person. We are having a discussion, everything's going along these lines, and lack of communication, that's definitely there. The texting at the odd hours, the lack of transparency, and the lack of willingness and effort from what I had understood to be on their end was eclipsed by the fact that when they were on this vacation, I got an invite, or no, it wasn't even an invite, it was more so like a hypothetical, wishful thinking invite that the next time would be the opportunity for me to tentatively go because they hadn't realized that me going on vacation with them was an option, when an even smaller, more feasible option would have been to just text me back within a reasonable time frame. That was actually the second red flag because the first red flag was the lack of communication. But fast forward to last week, I get this message after I had done my due diligence of unfollowing this person and ceasing all communication. It had been 2 months, so this all happened, I guess, within the beginning of this year. Right now, we are in April. So this all happened earlier on this year, and then after a 2 month period, I received a text, and it says, "Hey, how are you? I only realized that you had followed me now. I guess you know what's best for you." And I didn't answer because there was nothing for me to say. After I get another message that states, "Oh, seems like you're ignoring my messages. I'll give it another day, and then I'm going to accept the I after so keep in mind that this is after 2 months of zero communication, and this is after 6 months of having known each other. So after all of that being said, I was told that I was going to be given a couple of days to get back to them, and at that point they would have to just accept the new reality. And then there was a follow-up message, but I couldn't see it because I didn't open the message. The preview on Instagram cut off. Um, so we'll never know what the weird thing that I was doing was. I guess we'll never know. But that in itself, it wasn't even so much about the message. Okay, so put things into perspective. This story that I'm telling you right now, I've told people. And then the one that I'm going to tell you guys that happened to me today has not been divulged to anyone. So you guys are first listeners. So as I had explained to, I don't recall who I was explaining it to, but what had bothered me the most about the situation was the fact that the communication that I was requesting was so difficult to obtain till it wasn't of any value to me. That's the wrong way to phrase it. What bothered me the most was that there was such a lack of communication, and then all of a sudden, after the lack of access, and not that there was any lack of access because there was a whole 2 month gap. It was not like it was a week, it was a whole 2 months. After this whole situation passed, then all of a sudden, the communication that I was requesting was all of a sudden manageable and feasible and doable, and that kind of just like made me so uncomfortable. And I had to save my breath, so I just let it be, and that was that, and I have no regrets. I honestly had nothing to say because my perspective had been made clear from the initial point of last year or 5 months ago when I had mentioned that I would like to have clear communication. So that's fine. That's okay. But as life continues and then life picks up and life goes on and everything like that, we all have our own battles and concerns and deals that we have to manage. It's not necessarily so much the situation, it has to do more with the fact that it becomes a lot more difficult. I know this is super unfair to put this onto someone because as I'm sitting here telling you guys all of this, there's the equal possibility that someone is going through just as much as I am, if not more, if not less. But still, there is something there. But just the other thing would just have to be that someone would like to get to know you more, get access to you, become a part of your life. And that's such a beautiful, wonderful thing because people are not, I don't think that everyone is ill intended. That's definitely not the case. It just so happens that sometimes, especially when things are already overwhelming as is, you get to a point where this person is trying to get to know you the way they know how and they're simply not helping. What happened today was just overwhelming and exhausting. So I'm on Hinge and everything like that, and I get a couple of matches, and this match, who mind you, also I was super invested. I was like, the profile, very very cool. I'm a fan. So we're there in the profile, everything that's happening. I send a message, they reply, and after that there was no communication till today as I am filming this. And this happens, and the conversation resumes with them asking for me for my social media, which I personally didn't like. I would rather someone, if they're going to try to get to know me, ask for my phone number, but that's a personal preference. I don't think that's representation of a person's character, but honestly, after we get to the end of the story, it just might have been. So I give them my social media, we're speaking, everything like that. And then as we're having this conversation, I realize that this is more so an interview. And I'm interviewing this person for a position that they don't even seem to want. I guess in most circumstances, as you're getting to know someone, any sort of chance that you're trying to get to know the person, ask about their interests, ask about their hobbies. If you want to formulate it or like use it metaphorically to be an interview, then yes, we're interviewing them to have a spot in our life. Amazing. We love that. I just don't understand how, excluding the time in which we had been speaking when we had first matched, today in itself, I don't understand how over a 4 or 5 hours span conversation, you're unable to ask me anything about myself. Not one thing at all. And then I start feeling weird and I start feeling like I'm overreacting for going back and then wanting to count exactly how many questions I asked to get to this point in the conversation. And before I was about to film this video, I remember seeing that the person had reacted with a laughing emoji to my message. And I was like, okay, well, at least that's some sort of humanity, that the person is able to have a sense of humor and things that I'm funny and everything like that. But I'm just like, that's not enough. That just isn't enough. And it doesn't have to be. When you go searching for things, we ignore the obvious signs. It's like searching for a needle in a haystack without realizing that you left the pen open and the horse runs out. Bucky's gone. I left so many open windows. I tried to mention that I was doing this, or I tried to mention that, for example, I was interested in this sort of like philosophy, or I was reading this, or I was doing that, and I wasn't partaking in that kind of sport. And two things that I think I must take into account was that it was all relative to the person mentioning things about their life. And those were all things that were brought to my attention or brought to my knowledge because I had the decency to ask. I don't want to be liked. I don't want to be desired. I don't desire to feel desired. I think that that's kind of one of those things that will happen naturally, it will happen occurringly, but dealing with sort of like these kind of like instances, it just makes me want to just stay in bed, on like a rainy day and just curl up in bed and just like watch TV because sometimes it feels like what's the point? Like what's the point if that's going to be the circumstance? And I know you have to weed through circumstances, and I'm very grateful that I'm able to know exactly what it is that I expect in terms of conversations with anyone, not just romantic, not just sexual, not platonic, just anyone in general. These feelings that I'm feeling right now regarding the situation are not isolated feelings. I understand that this is not just a predicament in which I'm speaking about another person, how they make me feel, because it's also a reflection of how I'm feeling right now in other aspects of my life. School and hobbies and just like life goals and passions and everything like that. It's sometimes a question of the constant pushing, not only for myself through the tasks that needs to get done, but also through a matter of the people that I have met or I have yet to meet that will have a positive or negative impact. It's just not easy to deal with. And I don't know, having this conversation today, I was like, am I not even worthy of being asked how I am? You go into all of these profiles and you read exactly what this person is looking for, and I'm just like, oh, maybe you haven't found what you're looking for because you're unable of establishing any form of empathy, any sort of basic social skills. And you're like, oh, well, it would be nice to be that person. It would be nice to be with someone. I'm certain that that would be a lovely feeling to have, but I don't think that it's something that can just be wished for and then it occurs, because that's how you end up in situations that you don't want to be in. So there's absolutely no rush for any of this. There's absolutely no rush for feelings to develop or feelings to occur, or there's no rush to feel anything. I think I'm able to understand that, and I'm glad that I don't feel the urge to put myself in any sort of situation, because I think that it's going to make myself be in a better circumstance, because I know for certain that it will not. And that is just going to be something that has to develop in its time. And until that happens, I think that I'm quite okay. But what I'm not okay with is poor treatment from others. It can affect you, and that's normal. And it will affect you sometimes, but you just have to keep on pushing. And that's okay, because that's how we got this video. And I'm very grateful that I was able to share this and talk about it. Sometimes you have a bad day because of someone else and you get through it and then you live to see another day. And that's that. Thank you for listening. I hope you guys are all doing well. I'm going to try and edit this right away. And stay cool, stay safe, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye for now. Ciao. Bye.